This shows you data from the Chef case in Hartford, comparing Hartford with 3 suburbs. And you can see here the class size doesn't differ much. Children in poverty are 30 times as high in cities in some of the suburbs. Free lunch is radically different. The number of single parents is many orders of magnitude greater. The dropout parents, very small numbers in some suburbs, very large numbers in Hartford. Percent minority, 92 versus 6 versus 7. Foreign language, more than half the kids in Hartford go to school not having English as their home language. Jobless parents, 40% of the ones in Hartford, 0.8% in Farmington, 2% in Glastonbury, 2% in West Hartford, and those are probably temporary. We're talking about different worlds. Segregation by race relates to different worlds of opportunity that affect schools and classrooms in many profound ways, just devastating ways. We put health statistics up here, they'd be the same. We put people who are attacked and victims of violence, would be the same. We see level after level of relationship between school segregation, poverty, and all other forms of education as well. This shows you the 1,000 schools in New York City. And it shows you those kids who are above free lunch level, they're increasing percentages as we go down the bottom axis, and those who are above the grade level in achievement. You can see out of 1,000 schools, there's a very strong relationship. Now there's a difference, of course, at each level of poverty among different schools. But the highest scores of the students who are at 20% of poverty or where there's 80 to 100% poverty, one at the bottom, the highest scores in that group are below the lowest scores in the group that has almost no poverty, which would include most of your white middle class schools. Very few in New York City, but there's lots in the country. This just shows you the first round of Regents test in New York, and you can see only 8% or 15% of students in New York and 8% of the students in other big cities in New York State passed all 3 tests. We're passed about 60% of students in the state, something like that. There's huge relationships between test scores, segregation by race, segregation by poverty. There's also very striking relationships between the quality of teachers, their level of experience, what level they're teaching at, what the curriculum is, how many college prep courses are, what kinds of college advising there is, whether the colleges recruit from the school. Many, many dimensions of inequality are associated with segregation. This just shows you what happens when you start sanctioning schools on the basis of the low test scores, which are very related to poverty of parents and children. This is what we're doing with the No Child Left Behind Act, and it has very disproportionate effects on Black and Latino and language minority schools. They're being punished for the low test scores. They're being asked to achieve more each year than the low poverty schools, and they're threatened. This fall, we've seen schools being dissolved and experiencing other sanctions in Michigan. 2 years from now, all over the country, thousands of schools will be subject to sanctions like that if they don't meet goals that no school system has ever met without poverty schools. In No Child Left Behind, students are given a chance to transfer if they are in a failing school. The school is beneficially marked as failing to make adequate progress. But we found they had no place to transfer to when we studied 10 cities. There were almost no low poverty, reasonably high achieving schools in those cities to transfer to, so in most of these places only 1 or 2% of the people actually transfer. So we have kind of a right to a different opportunity that doesn't actually entail any real opportunity. It's a very poor substitute. So let me just make, that last one? No, that's fine. You can just turn it off. Let me just make a couple points. Desegregated schools generally improve educational opportunities for everybody if you consider educational opportunity broadly, to include life chances, networking into successfully functioning cross-racial lines as adults, and so forth. Kinds of things the Supreme Court talked about in the Michigan case. They do produce on average some gain in achievement for minority students. They greatly improve the likelihood of graduating from high school, going to college, having an integrated life. They also have lifetime effects like that for white students. Genuinely integrated schools are much more powerful than schools that are just desegregated and desegregated inside. And you don't get those schools unless you work at it. We used to have a federal program that did work at it, which was abolished in the Reagan administration, Emergency School Aid Act. Segregation is still inherently unequal, I would argue. It's not for the psychological reasons that Lieutenant Clark talked about, although they may still hold some dimensions, but it's for fundamental economic, social, political reasons, in my view. There are built-in systems of inequality that are powerfully reinforcing the effects of inequality. And those work primarily through unequal peer groups. Students are less prepared in their classes, lower levels of competition. Unequal teachers, less experienced teachers, more teachers teaching out of their subject, teachers from research training institutions. Much more turnover of students from year to year, and teachers and administrators in high-poverty schools. A much more inadequate real curriculum, which is ironically being furthered now in a lot of schools by forcing excessive focus on a couple of test outcomes as the only measure across schools. That's producing an elimination of other curriculum, as reported by teachers of the conservative opportunity. We have a different real curriculum. You can see it in high schools very clearly. There's been a lawsuit in California about the lack of AP and honors courses for minority schools. But even where the formal curriculum is the same, the level of instruction is radically different. Because the level of instruction is determined by the quality of the teacher and the level of preparation of the kids in the class. And they are just wildly different by the high school level, almost any place you look. Also, the information and networks and life chances issues that attach to high schools are tremendously different in minority and predominantly middle class, whiter Asian schools. There's much richer information network among students and parents and the community in middle class schools by going to college. Students learn about it early. There's a default into college preparatory curriculum. A variety of things are fundamentally different about it. Also, the colleges are looking at those schools for their students and getting them from there. There is a path to college, it's clear, and it doesn't exist in a lot of inner city high schools that are terminal. Now, segregation by race is almost always segregation by poverty in our society. If it weren't, it would be different. If all those things weren't related, it would be very different. There's a systemic measure of what's going on that you could look at, because now we're getting all the data published by subgroups in all the schools in the country. Look at it how it's related to segregation. You'll see your newspapers almost never talk about it. But it's there, and it's very easy to discover, and it's very systematic. Most of the schools that we're really taking rigid sanctions against and marking as failing schools are almost all minority schools. We recently released a report that showed that only half of Black and Latino students are graduating from high school in the United States, if you look honestly at the statistics. And that the problem is concentrated in several hundred big cities, almost all minority, almost all poverty high schools, a lot of which don't graduate much more than a quarter of their students, and if we really count them accurately. This is a scandal of tremendous proportions. A recent report that we helped release in Chicago showed half of the young Black men who don't graduate from high school in Chicago, and that's about 60% of the young Black men, don't have any jobs. And there's no welfare for young Black men. You have a community that's collapsing and has no relationship to the mainstream of society. Now, I have 2 minutes on sort this. Desegregation helps this. It doesn't solve it all. Kids are still poor, they still go home to unequal conditions, we still don't have a healthcare system, we have a lot of other things. But it does make a difference, and it does make things possible. And it has pretty strong effects, not just on minority kids, but on white kids as well. Now, nobody who favors desegregation doesn't think that we have to desperately work on upgrading schools in high poverty areas. I don't know any such person in the whole country. It's often presented as if it's an either or. It really is a both and. You have to do as much as you can on both fronts if we're going to have any chance at all, given the tools that we have. A lot of people who say it must be a choice don't believe in either. Almost everyone who believes in desegregation believes in both. We need to work on metropolitan exchange. Most of the segregation in the country is between school districts in metropolitan areas where 80% of our population lives. There's a lot of programs, magnet schools, other things. Right here in New Haven, there's a bunch of them being created that are fairly successful. We could do that on a much bigger scale, and not just the central cities, but the racially changing suburbs need that if they're not going to be ghettoized. Racially changing suburbs, there's thousands of them now, and there's going to be many more in the future. They have no plan, no help, no support, and they need it both residentially and in terms of educational options. We need to use the choice mechanisms in a way that fosters integration instead of segregation. We learned back in the 1960s, if you had choice without